but you have to also think what the user is trying to achieve, what success means to them.
Very interesting story, Nikhar, I should admit. And I think then you're the right person to ask my next question is,
The true power of your product is you need something that can encapsulate that.
now, how do you think a proper documentation contributes to achieving that organizational goal?
And with
Yeah.
documentation, you can always bring, that's an add-on.
Getting that little appreciation from your sales or pre-sales
Yeah.
team is the biggest motivation you can get, right?
Whereas some organizations see it as, no, that's not a necessity, but that's something that will enhance business reputation.
Welcome to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. Today, we have Nikhar Sawhney, Senior Technical Writer at Cisco. Hi, Nikhar. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Gauri. Thank you for having me. And hello to all our audiences.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. And before we talk anything about documentation, I'm very curious to know, how did you get into this career path and how are you enjoying so far?
So I think there are two parts of it, how I got into this career path. One is courtesy 2008 recession. I was way back. I mean, I passed my college, had a placement with Dell Systems back then, but the offer got delayed because of the crisis, and all the job offerings were sort of stuck. And at that point of time, I had some time. I was preparing for an MBA, and I was at an institute wherein they used to teach all those, you can say, coaching for the examination. It used to be CAT and GMAT back
Yeah.
in my time. So they felt that I was really good at maths, and they offered me a job. And incidentally, in the same year, CAT went from paper-based to online. And
Okay.
this was a big step because not all the students had this knowledge. Not everyone was comfortable with computers. Not everyone knew what to do when your internet gets stuck, because we didn't have those good broadbands back then. So they just said me, one of my employers, like, hey, can you write some of this help guides? Can you help people and all this? I said, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. So that's when I got to know that there is a documentation side of software as well. And
All
before
right.
that, I was not aware much, but yeah, like fresh out of college, more into coding, wanted to be
Yeah.
a developer, had seen myself, I'll be a developer, do something in my life in the field of software development. But this was okay, there's something along these lines as well. And I was continuing like this. In 2012, after I got married, it got a bit difficult because my working days were, my weekly offs were on weekdays and my wife's weekly off. So she was a business analyst, her weekly offs were on weekends. So we did not get a lot of
Okay.
time together. So she said that, what you do technically, there's something known as technical writing. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So we just did some research, and I found that, yeah, there is a scope that I can, do that. And at her organization, the manager for tech documentation, he met me, he just explained, and he said, like, it's worth taking a risk. You're not from this field, but still it's worth taking a risk. We'll have you on board and see, because you might bring a perspective that my team here does not have, because you're not from this industry. That's how it started. And now almost 16 years, I'm still doing it
Wow.
all right. Have been I see myself, like, there was a time when I used to be very closely working with QAs in a traditional waterfall model, and now I'm
Yeah.
actually with the product managers, sitting with them,
Mhm.
doing ideations, like, okay, this is how you're planning a feature, so that's how the documentation will be planned. So yeah, I've come across a long way. And what surprises me is that I never felt like moving out of documentation. Like, there were times when, you felt like, oh, that's a lucrative thing, product management is lucrative, or initially my dream
Mhm.
was to do something in development or something of that sort. But somehow every time I've been challenged, or I have been given up, or provided with an opportunity, that I found so much in this space that
Mhm.
it's been 16 years, and I still think I can do another 20-25 years before I actually think of moving away.
So it's just started for you then.
Yeah, yeah, true that.
Interesting, very interesting story, Nikhar, I should admit. And I think then you're the right person to ask my next question is, how important do you think is it for organizations to view documentation as a strategic asset rather than a necessity? Because you spoke about initially you were in the waterfall model where
Yeah.
documentation came as a last step of the
Yes.
development or release process. Now you're working very closely with right from the beginning. So
Yeah.
why do you think it's very important?
The reason it is very important is that you have to understand that when you dish out a product today, I'm being very SaaS oriented rather than, I'm not talking in terms of consultancy and other software expertise, but when I say product based, when you're more product based, you have to understand that your product is it's it might be easy to install, self installation and everything, but you have to enable people to understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of research that a team does, that a company does in making a product, and you cannot explain that entire research, all those use cases, different scenarios. You can come up with the best use case and tell your customer during a sales pitch, like, what, this is what you can do, or this is what you can achieve. But there are so many layers, so many various integrations in today's world, because everything is so interconnected, that
Correct.
in order to explain what the true power of your product is, you need something that can encapsulate that. And I think that cannot be done in a sales pitch, or that cannot be done in a demo. So you need to have that resource wherein, I as a customer can lean back and understand, oh yeah, that's what this product can do. How about I try and integrate with this? What about I do this with that? Can I get an alert integration integrated with my email, or maybe my Zoom meeting can? So there are so many things, there's so many possibilities around,
Mm.
which are very important to explain. And now documentation, I feel, has become that platform that explains you all those capabilities, those different possibilities. And it's more about contributing more towards the end user's success or goal, rather than just providing them support, like, hey, yeah, that's a software, click this
Mm.
to do that, this can do that. If you want to do this is the method, or this is the procedure, this is a certain set of code that you need to implement. That's true, that's still important, but I feel that beyond that, now it's also about explaining those different capabilities. Like, how can your system talk with other systems? How can you use the other APIs and then, club together and come up with the solution? So all these things is what now documentation explains. So yeah, that along with a lot of customer success is something you can seek. Like, you can ensure that your support, like customer support, can also get a lot of help. Even the users will become a lot of self-reliant, like they know what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. And if you have really good documentation, it helps costs to, cut your costs, support costs. So that's
Mm.
why feel that it's important, like, to have it placed strategically, and not just as a support tool or a good to have kind of thing.
Okay. So then, what elements do you think are important to make such an high impact documentation?
So it depends. So first of all, I think you have to understand and work closely with the team, with your development teams. It could be
Mm.
engineering, product, research nowadays, because a lot of things are research heavy. That what you're actually trying to achieve, what is it that you're trying to achieve, what solutions are you trying to provide. Once you have that understanding, is only when you can be able to write the right documentation. So
Mm.
it's one part to write how to make piece of product work. It could be from installation to configuration to maintaining and all. That's one part of it. But it's also important to understand what it will solve. Can you come up with a use case? Like, can you think like, yeah, this is what the solution is? Can you get into the client mindset? For example, if you're trying to help an investment banker, can you actually get in the head of an investment banker, or can you understand that scenario, that what actually that person is trying to solve? How
Mm.
important is that thing for that person? How well that person needs to know the system in and out to make a quick informed decision? And how can
Mhm.
your documentation help that person to be educated enough for your product? Because you have done the analysis or the research in the background, but your end user might not know all the research. So that's where I think it's important to get more into the, it's a cliche to say that you have to think like a user, but not just think like a user, but you have to also think what the user is trying to achieve, what success means to them. It may not necessarily mean that you solve the problem for the end user. It also means that you can at least provide a direction, or you
Mm.
can at least help him or her understand, like, yeah, this is what we think is the reason or is the root cause.
Yeah.
Troubleshooting in a way.
Yeah.
So that's I think very important. Plus, I think the way you structure your documentation is also very important. In today's day and age, I think search plays a very, very key important, and
Very
that's a,
true.
that's a most important aspect. You have to spend a lot of time how your search engine works. There are very good search engines, you can collaborate with them, but you also have to test it yourself. Try and see how randomly a user can use those. I mean, it's not a guarantee that they would use the right keywords. Have you tried it out yourself? Like, oh yeah, I know this person wants to know how to configure this particular thing, but have you tried it yourself? What are the possibilities that they don't use the right keyword, but they still get the most accurate result? So
Mm.
that's something very important. Also, you have to understand there are recurring users and there are new users. How does your documentation cater to that? Because if I'm
Interesting.
using a product for the first time, my expectations are please help me understand more of the background, more of this nitty-gritties, the how do I say the principles behind it. But if I'm a recurring user, I know what your product does. I know everything. Now I'm more like, oh, I'm stuck here, or oh, you know what, this is not functioning the way it should. I'm looking more at troubleshooting. I'm not looking at learning.
A
So
lot
you
more
have to
information. Yeah.
yes. So you have to make sure that you cater for both kind of audiences.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I put it right now.
All right. Now, I think whatever we spoke in the last few minutes, ultimately the aim is to get a customer satisfaction up, right?
Of
Whatever,
course.
you're a product-based company or a service-based company. Now, how do you think a proper documentation contributes to achieving that organizational goal?
So there are two ways, I mean, that we have discussed. Is to summarize, I'll put this in two different parts. One of them is internally you're saving a lot to the company by being efficient, and your support is less utilized. I mean, you can save a lot in your support. And I don't mean by making your support lean or reducing the jobs and XYZ, but you can
Mm,
make the response faster. If your support engineers know what needs to be there, where is it there? Even I'm not saying you might not be able to share everything on your external document. Even if you have some good internal knowledge base, if your support people know where it is, how it is, yes, everything would be there. It's a lot easier for them to you know help the user. And also the other side is, even while doing a lot of sales pitch, pre-sales, solution engineering, a lot of times we hear this feedback that, oh, your documentation was of really good help. It was so
mm,
easy. We were trying to set this particular, we were trying to do this complex installation at an end user's machine, but we had all these steps here, so we just had to copy paste, and it was done in a jiffy. So that gives a good impression, saves time. And even your client will be, oh yeah, if there's something wrong, they have this good troubleshooting mechanism, or you can say a first line of support, and I can get on my way again. So that's important. And again, as you touched upon, customer satisfaction, if you have good
mm.
impression, like for example, I'm very inspired by Stripe, that
Yeah.
documentation. If you
Mm,
see, because that gives you an impression that, oh yeah, I can, just by reading, I can do a lot more things, and I'm not dependent on actually reaching out to support or whatever.
mm.
So it's there out there. That's how I see. And also, maybe, I mean, I've touched this before as well, but there is always a certain level of hidden potential in your product which you cannot sell in the first place. And with
Yeah.
documentation, you can always bring, that's an add-on. You can say that a customer would be like, oh yeah, that I never knew about this. Oh, can I integrate it with this as well? I was not aware about
Yeah.
this. So yeah, that can be that wow factor. So that's how
Yeah.
you do that.
Nice. So I think as a technical writer, getting that little appreciation from your sales or pre-sales
Yeah.
team is the biggest motivation you can get, right?
Exactly. I mean, and a lot of constructive feedback as well. At many a times,
Mm,
these people says, "Hey, is it possible can you do this for us?
mm,
Or these endpoints, can you make sure that they are working fine? Or can you just do that?" Sometimes that even a small error, or that was just a sample code, but yeah, if you can just fix that, because many times we just refer that sample code as is. I mean, they're not
yeah.
supposed to, but they do it. Also, I have at my current role, I have met many customers directly, like in conferences and in various other events, customer events, and I got direct feedback from them. Hey, do you use our documents? Yes, we do. What's good? What's bad? So that the good, of course, motivates you, and the feedback also helps you understand what you can do better. You think you're doing a good job because now this is the flip side. I feel that when you're too engrossed with the product development, you yourself become you feel I know everything, so the world knows everything.
Yeah.
That's the sad part of it, and you know more of it because you're ingrained from the very beginning. But when you
Yeah.
sit and chat with the user, they tell, oh, then you realize, okay, I never thought that they're not aware of this, or I felt
Exactly.
this is too trivial, but that's not the case actually.
Yeah.
It's not that everybody knows this networking protocol or everybody understands this, so you have to explain that as well. So
Yeah.
that's a good way to get to all to understand all of this. And yeah, that's the only way we can, I mean, that's a validation for us, like, yeah, what would
Yeah.
customers say?
So let's talk about the challenges that businesses face when they are trying to make the most use of documentation.
Challenges, I think this varies from organization to organization. And in my experience, I have worked with some very promising startups as well as some good established names. And without taking names, there is a different mindset that every organization has when it comes to documentation. Some of the organizations still see documentation as a necessity, if I can say so, whereas some organizations see it as, no, that's not a necessity, but that's something that will enhance business reputation. It's important, just like,
Mm.
many other things. It's very difficult to get a return on investment. If I see from a business point of view, like many companies see, okay, if I invest so much in documentation, what's the return I get? Because that's how business works. But many a times the value that you add, it's very difficult to measure. That's something we struggle a lot from a, in the documentation world, and that's one of the biggest challenges that I face. Like, if I have to say to any organization that can you invest so much and so forth in documentation, and then they ask what will be the returns, it's very difficult to quantify those returns. Like, okay, see, you invested X amount, you spent in X dollars, and here's a profit of 2x, because we actually don't sell anything per se. We don't sell
Yeah,
documentation. It's a part of the product. And
correct.
it's no organization charges, hey, if you want, they can charge you for support after some time, but they cannot say, oh, if you want documentation, you have to pay X amount extra. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
very
happen, it
true.
doesn't work. It doesn't work
Very
that
true.
way. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge. And that's the reason why you see that some organizations, when they know how they can, I mean, it also depends a lot on the leadership and how well, you as an organization, you value documentation. And when they do that, it becomes a lot easier for the documentation team to function. But if not, then the challenges are first and foremost to get that recognition, to get that understanding. You have to continuously pitch in and, like, this is what we bring to the table, this is what we're doing. So that's a big challenge, if you ask me.
Nice. Very, very nice to hear. And many facts are very nicely put, Nikhar. And okay, let's move on to the rapid fire round questions
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, any documentation related resources you recently came across and found very interesting?
I think Write the Docs always has. I mean, I'm not able to attend the conferences all the time, but at least what they provide, I like to do that. There's another very small, I won't say small, I mean, by small, I don't mean in terms of the number, but it's not that popular. It's a conference called SOAP. It's a very European
Okay.
conference. I think it's run from Poland. Even they have some interesting topics, and they try and integrate documentation with other facets as well. Like, how
Mhm.
does marketing and documentation go together? How does but documentation and solution and support works together? So that's interesting. That's something I like.
All right. Now, one word that comes to your mind when you hear documentation.
Enablers.
Nice. A piece of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self.
20-year-old. Okay. I don't know what advice, but yeah, if it from a professional standpoint, I would advise myself that try and form more connections, as
Mm.
in with the real world. I'll just explain a bit. I know this is a rapid fire, but what I feel is that during my college days, or when I was 20, we just had a very limited alumni and a very limited reflection of how the actual industry is. Whereas when we actually stepped into software industry, it was very different from what I saw it in college. So I
Mm.
think if I can let my younger self know that, there's another industry, try and make more connections there from your
Yeah.
seniors or from otherwise, that would be great.
All right. Fantastic. So I know 16 years of over 16 years of experience can't be shrunk in 20 minutes. So we've
No,
tried our best to ask some relevant questions to you, Nikhar. But if there is anything else that you would like to share to our audiences today, you're very welcome.
thank you so much for having me, first of all. And I think yeah, the thing is that I would encourage all of you to, dig deep in this area. I mean, it's not well explored, to be very honest.
Mm.
There is a lot to do in this area. And it's not just about writing documentation. There's much more to it, if you see. So yeah, keep digging and keep writing.
All right. Thank you so much for taking your time today and all the very best for all your projects that you're engaged now. And yeah, have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.